Fire Emblem Heroes has some major problems that have been slowly strangling the life out of the game. In today's video, I'm going to be going over the 10 I think are the biggest problems. Quick disclaimer before we start. If you don't enjoy negative videos critiquing your favorite games, this video isn't for you. Also, Fire Emblem Heroes is not going to be dying anytime soon. The game makes too much money as it is, but I do think these problems could lead to Faye's eventual death in the future if they aren't addressed. Let's jump into our first major problem, new player experience. New players are the lifeblood of any game. If a game isn't getting new players, that means players who quit aren't being replaced and the game isn't growing, which can lead to lower sales and the game eventually being shut down. And if there's one thing Faye does extremely poorly, it's entice new players into playing. Now there are several reasons for this, many of which I will be discussing in more detail in a little bit. But what it comes down to is Faye is overly complex, too unforgiving in its competitive game modes. It doesn't give new players enough materials to get going, such as refining stones, dues, sacred seals, and fodder just to build heroes. The game also does a poor job at introducing players to new game modes and events that run regularly. Faye did attempt to remedy some of this with Heroes Path, which offered new players some heroes and guided them to new activities, but this has been completely abandoned since its introduction. The heroes offered as rewards are extremely outdated, and even then, the rewards are insufficient. Speaking of outdated, the main free-to-play heroes are horrendous. I know, I may have some pushback from like the 10 people who max invested in Alphonse and Sharena, but the truth is, these heroes are essentially useless without hyper investment, which no new player will be able to do. These heroes have weapons and stat lines that are ridiculously bad, and once again, the only way to fix that is by investing over 3,000 dragon flowers into each of them, getting them an arcane weapon, and a whole new set of skills, which all cost a player a massive amount of orbs. The reason this is a massive problem is that these three heroes are the ones most new players will be forced to use as bonus units in Arena, Ether Raids, and even for some quests. And if you ever started a game after its original release, you know how absolutely abysmal it feels to be so underpowered at the beginning of a game. I do want to mention that Faye does offer new players 2 choices of Choose Your Legends units from the past 2 years, as well as several free mythic heroes from each book, which definitely helps in the beginning of the game, but I think a lot more needs to be done, especially when you consider the sacred seal system in particular. We have over 250 seals in the game currently. Now obviously not all of them are used, but even if 50 of them are used, that's 50 seals you need to make and then upgrade as well, which will take forever for a new player to accomplish, as they can't get max rewards from Arena Assault. So as a new player, you're mostly going to be reliant on events for their resources for months, if not years. As it is right now, new players just don't have an enticing reason to pick up this game, and that needs to change if Faye is going to have a long future. Let's move on to our second major problem, the story. This problem ties back into the first, but the story of Faye is undercooked, to put it nicely. I know a lot of people will have very different opinions on the last book and the books before it, but that's not really my point. My main point is that the story doesn't have a big enough emphasis in the game. The story mode is essentially the same every year. We get 5 new story quests with each chapter, every new hero's banner, which consists almost exactly of the same thing every time. The first quest has some story tidbits, then we fight against a few heroes, and then a few unnamed NPCs. Then the second quest has some random hero from the new banner do a one-liner, then we kill a few more heroes. The third quest is another few more lines of story, then the exact same thing. The fourth quest, another random one-liner, then we kill some heroes. And then finally, the fifth quest has some story tidbits in the beginning, we kill some heroes, and then some more story tidbits at the end. This is essentially the same formula for every single chapter of Faye's story from book 1 until now. It's repetitive, underdeveloped, and can be doing so much more. Yes, I know, occasionally we get a unique chapter where there is some kind of actual boss or hoop we have to jump through, but typically that's once or twice a book at most. The point is that the story should be something people look forward to every new Heroes update. It should be something pushing the narrative of the game, attaching us to the original characters of Faye, and also introducing people to the heroes on the banner. This alone could solve so many problems, such as acting as a hook for new players to start playing, and more importantly, for intelligence systems in particular, acting as a way to get people attached to these characters. If more people like these characters, then they are much more likely to pull for them on the new banners, which means more summoning, which means more money. We've seen this strategy work in games like Genshin Impact or Honkai Star Rail, where they spend time investing into these characters. So when it comes time to pull on their banner, it's no longer just about how meta they are or how powerful they are, but the characters themselves and how much people like them. Speaking of banners, let's talk about a big problem that doesn't get brought up enough. Our barracks are way too large, and the game is way too punishing. Now don't misunderstand me, I don't mean our barracks should hold less heroes. What I mean is that we have way too many heroes in Fae, and the rate we get new heroes is just way too fast. Just to be clear, I don't think this will change as new heroes is the way IS makes money, and it also acts as new content for the game. But the reality is, there are so many heroes in this game, there's just not nearly enough things to do with them. I know some people may say this is a whale problem, but even as a free-to-play, you're getting 2 to 5 new heroes every single month, and that's without summoning. When you consider a player who summons on every banner, that can be up to 10 to 13 new heroes every month. And there just isn't enough to do with that many heroes. Take a second and consider how many heroes you actually use every month. Maybe around 30 to 50 at most? And there's over 1,000 heroes in the game. Even considering that, most people don't have all 1,000. A typical player is probably only using a fourth of their entire barracks. As someone who wants to play with a lot more heroes, I just can't find places to do it. The game is designed in such a way that you use a lot of the same heroes in several different game modes, or you use the same heroes every single week in particular game modes. For example, every other week you are using the same mythics on every single team in Ether Raids. The amount of heroes you actually get to play with in that mode is quite limited, especially when you consider bonus units. Arena forces you to play with legendary heroes, duo or harmonic heroes for scoring, and then a bonus hero on top of that, meaning you really don't even get much of a choice when it comes to which heroes you get to play with here either. And then lastly, Summoner Duels, which is very competitive. You can technically bring in whatever you want, but let's be real, not all heroes are made equal, and if you want to win, you're often going to be bringing your duo Thors and not your Rays. All of that wouldn't matter though if the game didn't punish you so hard for losing. One of the reasons people hate Ether Raids and Summoner Duels so much is that every time you lose, you get slapped in the face essentially. The escape ladder fixes this to an extent in Ether Raids, but let's not pretend it doesn't feel bad to lose a match. And I'm sure there are plenty of people who can tell you horror stories of losing runs in Arena, especially before Tactical Retreat was added. Where this is worse by far is Summoner Duels events like SDR STS, where players have limited lives, meaning every time you lose, you're one step closer to not being able to play at all. And it's this ridiculous level of punishment that pushes players towards either playing the meta or just not playing at all, which is extremely problematic and bad for the game. That brings us to our 7th major problem, the scoring systems. The scoring systems in Fae are horrendous, and further exacerbate the bad new player experience and how punishing the game feels. The first thing we have to discuss is how needlessly complex scoring is in Ether Raids and Arena. In order to score properly in Arena, you literally need to pull out an Arena calculator to check your hero's BST scoring, their SP scoring, their merge scoring, if they have a dual effect that increases their scoring. Don't forget legendary bonuses, or make sure your heroes are properly blessed as well, which honestly could have its own section in the video because the blessing system is utter garbage too. Then we move over to Ether Raids, where I literally had to make a video explaining the score system to help people understand, because it's so stupid. And the only place the game explains it is in this tiny bubble that no one apparently clicks on. But even if you do understand how it works, you still need merges on your mythic heroes to increase your score, which means new players will always be at a massive disadvantage, as they will not only need to merge up 3 mythics to +10 to score the maximum amount, but they also need to wait for the banners to arrive, which could be literally months. So even if a new player joins the game and wants to drop their entire wallet, they can't because they have to wait for the banner. And then finally we have Summoner Duels, which has some of the worst matchmaking in any game I've ever played. You will literally have rank 1 players like me playing against people all the way down in silver tiers with 1/3 of my ranking. This not only makes the game mode extremely difficult to approach, but it also makes it ridiculously punishing, as these new players essentially sign up to get beat up by more experienced players and then aren't even given another chance to learn because their lives run out. Overall, Fae just has some really poorly designed scoring and matchmaking, which makes the PvP even less fun, and PvP is what the game mostly focuses on. Our 6th major problem is the lack of focus on community features. Fire Emblem Heroes essentially has no in-game community features whatsoever. We technically have the friends list, which does allow us to add people, but it does almost nothing. We can't communicate with those people, play any game mode with those people, we get no rewards from our friends list, and the only 2 things we can really do are 1. Use our friend's hero in rival domains or Grand Conquest, or 2. Buy one of our friend's older heroes via forging bonds every once in a while. All of Fire Emblem Heroes community is external from the game, via things like YouTube, Discord, Reddit, or even Twitter. which is problematic because communities are what keeps games alive, keep people talking about them, attract new players to the game, as well as build hype and excitement. Obviously, I don't expect all of that to be done with inside Fae itself, but why don't we have anything at all? Genshin Impact has some limited co-op, multiplayer events, and an in-game chat. Honkai Star Rail does the more traditional route and lets you play with your friends' characters and rewards you with in-game money, which isn't like amazing, but it's something, right? Fire Emblem Heroes needs to add more community features into the game, such as a co-op game mode, an in-game chat where maybe all you can do is just share images of your summoning session, but that would be at least something, right? Give us some way to make us feel like we aren't all alone when we're playing this game. Okay, let's tackle one of the biggest problems. I think many people would put this as their #1 problem in the game: summoning. I want to start this off by being fair to Intelligent Systems. They have made some wonderful changes to summoning over the years, including adding the Spark system, removing old 5 stars from the normal summoning pool every year, adding a 4-star special rate, adding hero check, making it so you don't reset your pity completely when your pity broken, and even adding the summoning bubbles, which are a freaking scam, but that's fine. I honestly probably missed an improvement or two, but the point is, there have been radical improvements since Fae has released. With all that said, summoning still sucks, and that's coming from a whale who does a lot of summoning. Let's start off with my biggest gripe. The summoning pool is way too bloated. In particular, I'm talking about the 3 and 4-star summoning pool, which has around 180 heroes in it, and the value of these heroes are all over the place. We have newer heroes with good stat lines, we have heroes with decent fodder, and we have year 1 heroes with absolutely no value whatsoever. This means that summoning typically feels really bad, as a lot of times you're getting almost no value from pulling. I'm sure you've all heard of this by now, but there was a player who got 32 Diamots before they could plus 10 their Lapis, who is a 4-star hero, and should be way less rare. And this is just the first problem with summoning. Let's say you want to merge up an older 5-star hero, because they're a favorite. Well, you either can wait to get copies from the 4-star special rate, or your arena tickets, or you can summon on these old banners that show up every week, which still cost the same amount of orbs as the new banners do, but they don't even have a spark. You want to merge up a Gen 1 seasonal unit? You better save up all your orbs for the whole year, because they only come back one time. And of course, we can't talk about summoning without bringing up the Fae Pass exclusive sparks. That's right, you want any guaranteed value on your seasonal or legendary summons? You better have Fae Pass, or you can be RNG screwed quite easily thanks to all the color sharing. And the worst thing is, they've been adding more and more event banners that require Fae Pass too, which just puts a bigger divide in the player base between spenders and free-to-plays. Eventually, I'll make a whole video on how I would change the summoning pool, but the short version is, they need to separate the 3 and 4-star pool, make a free-to-play summoning pool with the older 4 stars and older 5 stars, and just limit the amount of currency you can get per week by playing. This would drastically help make summoning less painful, and at the same time, help new players too. Did you think we were done talking about summoning? Well, we're not. Number 4 is going to be skill accessibility. This is one of the things that Fae does the absolute worst with. I'm sure you are all aware, but skills are obtained through skill inheritance, which means that typically you need to summon heroes to give skills to other heroes. Obviously, there are some ways around this, which are combat manuals we get monthly and yearly. But let's not pretend that those offer anywhere near the amount of skills we need to build teams. They can be very nice, but they just aren't frequent enough, or they just don't offer many of the new skills we need for optimal builds. 95% of the time, you are going to need to summon heroes for skill inheritance, and that has been especially true this year. Now, the major problem with this is that most of the skills on 4-star units suck. Occasionally, we get a good skill like Attack Speed Ideal on Muriel, but typically we get trash old skills, and if we want new skills, we're either summoning for premium 5 stars to kill, or seasonal 4 stars, which come around once or twice a year. Or we spend grails on heroes to get decent skills, but honestly, once again, not amazing fodder. What this does is tie all hero building to summoning, which pretty much makes the entire game revolve around summoning, which, as I mentioned in the last section, isn't all that great. This is just the surface of why skill accessibility is trash. For example, Attack Speed Solo 3 is a skill that came out in 2018, over 5 years ago, and is still not available in the base 3 to 4 star summoning pool. That skill isn't even good now. Hell, Attack Speed Solo 4 isn't even very good now, yet we still don't have it available at an easy free-to-play level. If you want that skill, you're spending 100 or more heroic grails on a Summer Shez to get it, which for a lot of free players is just not reasonable. Quick Riposte 3, a day 1 skill, is still not available on a 4-star without spending 20,000 feathers. And this gets so much worse with newer skills, as many of these newer meta skills like attack speed finish, attack speed clash, don't even have their tier 3 versions available in the base summoning pool at all. If you want the tier 3 version of that skill, you better be ready to spend orbs on a seasonal 4-star to get them, or sacrifice a premium 5-star. And this brings me back to one of the biggest problems with skill accessibility: skill inheritance cap. I'm sure many of you saw this coming, but the skill inheritance cap being at 4 is absolutely stupid. With so many of these new skills being locked to 5-stars, many of them seasonal or limited, often it means you have to sacrifice multiple of the same 5-star just to get all the skills you want. So that means you could spend 100, 200, 300, or if you're me, 1,000 orbs for one copy of a 5-star, then not even be able to get all the skills you need off that 5-star. And it's gotten worse with the introduction of rearmed and attuned heroes. For example, we have Attuned Nino. If I want to get Remote Sparrow, Tempo 4, and her attuned skill, I need to sacrifice an additional premium 5-star to be able to do that. Hell, I can't even grab Tempo 4 and the attuned skill with one inherit. I would need to sacrifice 2 Ninos to do that. And this isn't some uncommon situation. In fact, it's the opposite. It's the norm. So up to this point, all of these problems are annoying, and often stupid, but they haven't directly affected your ability to understand and play the game. Well, that changes here, as number 3 of our major problems is game complexity. At this point, Fire Emblem Heroes essentially requires a PhD in theology, the ability to speed read, or an excellent memory to be able to play. The game has just gotten ridiculously complex. Back in the day, you would just click on the weapon, there would be a line or two explaining the weapon's effect, then you could do some basic addition or subtraction and understand how the matchups would be resolved. Now you need to read a short story for both heroes, solve for X then Y, calculate the damage reduction, add in all the combat bonuses, remember what terrain underneath you does, and then read all the other heroes around your enemy because they probably give that hero like 20 other effects. And if you're playing in summer duels, you have 30 seconds to do that. You better read fast. Oh, and don't forget, there are over 1,000 heroes in the game to remember, more like 700 if you only count preference weapons. Just to be clear, there's no going back to the simplicity of year 1 or year 2, but Intelligent Systems can make major changes to make it easier to understand this game. The first thing they absolutely need to do is create keywords for effects, and add in an in-game glossary, or make it so that when you click on the keyword, an explanation pops up. For example, let's use Bravecorn's weapon. As you can see, we have a massive wall of text, but it could just look like this. Slaying after unit acts applies Divine Vein Stone, if HP greater than equal to 25%, minus $5 stats on foe, and if you, 30% damage reduction, dragon adaptive damage. Look at that. That makes it so much easier to quickly read, and as long as you understand the keywords, you can understand the weapon quite quickly. While this doesn't remove the complexity of the game, it makes it much easier to approach, especially for new players who could then use the in-game glossary to understand the keywords that are used consistently throughout the game. The only big problem with that is that Intelligent Systems would need to make keywords for all the effects in the game instead of using their vague terminology they do now, so that everything can be consistent. And also, they need to stop making weapons with a different condition for every new effect on the weapon, as it just adds to the length of the weapon description and makes it that much more confusing. The other thing Intelligent Systems needs to do is create ways to teach players, new and old alike, the mechanics of the game. So many players I talk to don't understand how certain effects work or interact with each other, or how the AI prioritizes actions such as rally traps, dance traps, or so much more. Okay, this one might come off a bit mean, but Tactics Drills is a garbage game mode that doesn't make much sense, and there are like 5 people who enjoy it, one of which is Phoenix Master 1. The truth is, everyone else just watches PM1's videos, collect their 1 orb or 300 feathers, and move on with their day. This game mode should be utilized to teach players mechanics, such as how the movement works, how skills interact, how to properly position units, how the various traps work, how to play summoner duels, and so much more. This should be a tutorial section, and it should offer better rewards so people actually interact with it and learn the game. At the end of the day, Intelligent Systems needs to find a way to make this game easier to understand and more approachable. For almost everybody, this would probably be the biggest problem in Fire Emblem Heroes, but I think that's focusing on the problem itself and not the cause. So for me, number 2 is going to Powercreep. If you are currently playing Fae, this isn't a surprise at all. Powercreep is absolutely over the top stupid in this game. Heroes' shelf lives went from 1 to 2 years to a couple of months. Heroes can enter and leave the meta almost immediately, and this is mostly due to the insane amount of power creep this game has. Hell, at the beginning of this year, we got a new god sword every single month. Extremely power heroes like Legendary Robin are getting countered 8 months later. Tanks go from being unkillable 1 month to being absolutely destroyed by the newest nuke next month. Power creep has gotten so bad that even whales aren't investing into plus 10s anymore because the value just isn't there. You're better off summoning 1 or 2 copies of the newest hero, off the new banner, and then playing with them until they're power crept a month or 2 later. We have heroes like Wind Claude who just completely ignore all the rules of the game and can spam lethality twice in one combat. Elamine, who was once one of the best supports in the entire game, was hard countered so much that false start doesn't even have value if the enemy team has Freyr. Preference weapons now have such long descriptions that you might as well make yourself a cup of coffee and grab a snack because you're going to be reading that for quite a while. And unfortunately, that isn't where it ends. Power creep is now extended past just new heroes, but to new skills as well. If you want to have the best hero, not only are you often forced to summon new heroes, but also new skills for them every couple of months. And if you remember what I said earlier, skill inheritance sucks. These new skills can be game defining like Guidance 4 or Soaring Guidance, or just completely allow for new types of builds like Attack Speed Pledge. There's also a major power level difference between these new skills and the old ones. You can't compare the power of an old meta skill like Desperation 3 and a new meta skill like Physical No Follow or Speed Defense Tempo 4. The new skill just blows the old one out of the water. I mean, we have skills like Flared Sparrow that not only gives you stats, but real true damage and fire terrain, which has its own completely separate effect as well. Power creep has just gone way too far in this game, and it's gotten ridiculous. With all that said though, it's time to discuss number 1. What is the problem I consider the biggest in Fire Emblem Heroes? The problem that is the cause of many of the problems we've discussed up to this point. The biggest problem in Fire Emblem Heroes is the focus on PvP over PvE content. Unlike many other gachas that may be mostly new IPs like Genshin Impact or Honkai Star Rail, Fire Emblem is a very long franchise that has historically been a PvE or player versus environment game series. Games like Fates, Shadow Dragon, and a few other do have PvP in them, but only the most dishonest person in the world would ever say that that was the focus of those games. Fire Emblem, first and foremost, has always been a single player strategy game. So if that's the case, why is Fire Emblem Heroes so different? And why has it decided to focus on PvP so heavily? Well, Fire Emblem Heroes has been a PvP focused game essentially since Aether Raids came out. There are several reasons for this, but one of the major ones is that the game is designed with player created content at the forefront. Let me explain what I mean. Aether Raids is a game mode with a lot of depth. There are different maps, buildings, layouts to consider, there are different heroes to consider, and how each of them synergize into the different offensive and defensive strategies you decide to use. But all of that interesting choice, considerations, and the metas are developed by players. Intelligent Systems just hands the players the toys, and then essentially lets us use them against each other, which is where the content of Aether Raids comes from. Obviously they do cause changes in the meta by introducing new heroes, especially mythics, and also occasionally adding new buildings or traps, but mostly the meta is dictated by how players interact with each other. This is the same in Summoner Duels as well. They hand us maps, captain skills, and new heroes. We decide how to terrorize each other with them. In the same way, Arena and Arena Assault follow suit. This focus on player-created PvP content allows Intelligent Systems to be much more hands-off, as they typically only have to add a new map once a year at most, and then occasionally they'll increase the level of buildings and traps. They don't actually need to put development time into these game modes, which obviously saves them money and effort. When it comes to game mode content they actually create, it's not very much. 5 maps for a story mode each month, and a Bizzle map for the new legendary or mythic. So the second major reason is money once again. Gacha PvP is very volatile, as it essentially allows people to use the newest toys against each other. In doing so, it acts as a marketing or advertising tool. Essentially, the player who just lost goes, "Look how stupid that new hero is, if I had them, I would have won too." So they go summon. Or they think, if I just had this skill, things would have been different, so then they spend money to go summon as well. Essentially, it promotes the aspect of pay to win in Fang, which has been proven to work and makes a lot of money. So at the end of the day, we have 2 major reasons. Easier to develop, and it saves money, and it makes more money. The major problem is, as I mentioned earlier, Fire Emblem is a historically PvE franchise, meaning that a majority of people who are attracted or interested in this game would be existing Fire Emblem fans. And because many of them are existing fans, they're going to have certain existing expectations for a Fire Emblem game, one of them being a PvE focused game. And as someone who has spoken to thousands of players via Discord, Reddit, Twitter, and even my comment sections, one thing I've definitely noticed is that a majority of players hate PvP in Fae. People despise Summoner Duels. Just go look at the views on any SD related video and compare it to a banner reveal. People don't like Ether raids much either. A majority of people I talk to play this game to collect their favorite heroes and to build them up. That's it. And honestly, that's completely understandable. All you need to do is go look at the history of the franchise and you'll get a very good understanding of the audience. So here's the question. When did Fire Emblem get its biggest audience boost? If you said Awakening, you're right. Fire Emblem went from selling 251,000 copies of New Mystery to selling 2.37 million copies of Awakening. Even if you consider that New Mystery was Japan exclusive, it went from 610,000 with Shadow Dragon to over 2 million with Awakening. The audience for the franchise more than tripled, almost quadrupled. There could be a lot of reasons for this, but one of the biggest reasons has to be that Awakening introduced and focused on making the franchise more casual and more approachable. The option to turn off permadeath, the bigger focus on social aspects like marrying your two favorite characters to have children, which hadn't been in the franchise since Genealogy. And as the franchise continued to add more of these aspects to the games, an appeal to a wider audience occurred, which is why we see higher sales with Fates and Three Houses. A PvP-focused Fire Emblem game just creates so many problems. You don't appeal to your core PvE audience. The value of heroes in-game is determined by how good they are against other players, which in turn means the only way to get people to pull on a banner is 1. Releasing a very popular character, 2. Releasing power-crept heroes, 3. Releasing power-crept skills. This causes the power ceiling to be constantly rising, which makes old heroes worse, as they have to compete against new heroes to have value in the game. Because a majority of the content in the game is PvP, people who don't play PvP, most of the core Fire Emblem audience do not have much content to even play. The story takes maybe 10 minutes to complete, abyssal maps are once a month, and a majority of the other PvE content can be done on auto battle, like Tempest Trials, Rival Domains, Forging Bonds, and so much more. PvP content, as its name implies, pits player versus player, meaning it creates animosity amongst players as well, especially against whales. And I just want to remind you, I am one of the PvP enjoyers playing Fae. I've been top 1k in AR essentially since it existed. I get rank 1 in almost all the SD events. I watch PvP tournaments and even help with them. I love PvP, but I'm not so blind that I can't see how much damage it has caused this community and game. And it doesn't have to be this way. It's not like Intelligent Systems couldn't make money with a PvE gacha game. Hell, most of the top gacha games in the world are PvE focused. Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, and even Fate Grand Order, just to name a few. So here's my next question. As the developer of a Fire Emblem gacha game, which are you going to focus on? Casual PvE content, which appeals to a majority of your new audience, or PvP content, which appeals to the tiny, hardcore minority, which to be fair, I am a part of? The answer should be obvious. But because that didn't happen, we end up in our current situation, with a shrinking player base. So in order to keep making money, Intelligent Systems squeezes the core audience by adding power-crept heroes, skills, limiting skill inheritance so people have to summon more, limiting sparks to Fae Pass to push people towards the subscription, and the game has gone so complex, they've given up on the new player experience entirely. So here's my final question of the video. How can Intelligent Systems turn this around? The answer is simple, and it always has been. Give the audience what they want. Change the direction of the game. Focus on PvE content. Allow people to enjoy the game with their favorite heroes. Allow people to have content they can enjoy at all different difficulty levels. Add a new PvE game mode that has actual depth, that adds new design space, so every new hero doesn't need to outdo an old one. Add in community features like co-op. Make the new player experience better by giving out more currencies as rewards, by making skill inheritance better, by fixing the summoning pool. And I want to make this very clear. Intelligent Systems can do this. They have proven that Dev 1 does exist, because they created Ether Raids and Summoner Duels, which are both excellently designed game modes. Put your bias and hatred for PvP aside for 1 minute and consider this. Both of those modes offer so much more than our current PvE game modes. Story mode, kill 5 to 6 heroes. Forging Bonds, kill 5 to 6 heroes. Tempest Trial, kill 5 to 6 heroes on 7 maps. Binding Worlds, step on a portal, then kill 5 to 6 heroes. Seer Snare, kill 5 to 6 heroes, but you don't have any skills. Lost Lore, press a button every 20 hours. Grand Conquest, don't play the game. They can make better PvE game modes. I know they can. They just need to put in the effort. They need to know that is what we want. They need to hear our voices. The whole point of this video was to start a conversation. So I want to hear from you. What do you agree with? What do you think I'm wrong about? Or what did I possibly overlook? Drop a comment down below so we can start that conversation. Hopefully Book 8 releasing in a couple weeks addresses some of these problems and introduces a new PvE game mode. But we'll have to wait and see. As always, I'd like to thank all my members for their constant support. And please like and share this video so this video can reach a larger audience and we can have a bigger discussion. This has been Oblivion. I'll catch you all later.